It came from a place where no star had a name anymore. A tiny speck of light, fainter than the breath of nothingness, drifting quietly through the dark between galaxies. When it appeared, no one noticed. Only the cold, simple numbers jumped on the monitor at the Atlas telescope in Hawaii, a faint, strange signal not belonging to any known orbit. But within hours, other observatories saw it too. From Chile, from Antarctica, from Mauna Kea, all confirmed the same thing. An object was entering the solar system, not pulled, not propelled, but drifting freely, at a velocity that exceeded the sun's gravitational limit. They called it 3I divided by Atlas, the third known interstellar object ever observed by humankind. But the name was just a label, a dot on the map of the unknown. The object itself seemed to carry something science had never truly encountered: meaningful silence. Telescopes began to analyze its spectrum, and the results shattered every hypothesis. 3I divided by Atlas didn't reflect sunlight like a comet. It emitted light of its own. The glow wasn't bright, nor cold, but it pulsed with a strange rhythm matching the proton oscillation within the sun's chromosphere. A heartbeat, a resonance, a connection no one could explain. At first, scientists thought it was interference, but data from more than 7 observatories confirmed the same frequency was real. Every 142 seconds, 3I divided by Atlas emitted a short, fine pulse of light like a whisper. When converted to sound, the signal became a steady rhythm, like the heartbeat of a colossal living being. And so, the question arose: how could an interstellar object resonate perfectly with the sun even before approaching it? That question no longer belonged to physics. It belonged to intuition. In the days that followed, the telescopes recorded subtle changes in its light structure. The spectrum showed unusual hydrogen and oxygen bands, with water outgassing hundreds of times faster than any comet at that distance. It was breathing in the vacuum a long, cold, steady breath. Someone joked that if the universe were alive, this was how it inhaled. But when the first high-resolution image arrived, no one laughed anymore. 3I divided by Atlas had no stable shape. It wasn't spherical, nor icy. It was a shifting mass of energy. Its light flowed across its surface, swirling in faint, luminous rivers, like liquid glass streaming across a transparent world. Many experts began to suggest it wasn't a solid object at all, but a solid plasma structure, something that could only exist within the energy fields of young stars. If that were true, then 3I divided by Atlas might be a fragment from the core of a long-dead star, a memory of light. But soon, even that theory fell apart. While every other interstellar object curved outward and left the solar system, 3I divided by Atlas tilted slightly inward. Its trajectory bent, slowly but deliberately, as though responding to an invisible command. Not pulled, but choosing. And that path led straight toward the Sunday. The scientific community erupted with questions. Why would an interstellar body, meant to escape, turn toward the sun, toward a nuclear inferno, where even metal becomes gas? If it were made of rock or ice, it would disintegrate. But 3I divided by Atlas wasn't rock, it wasn't ice. Something inside it wanted to go there. Some astronomers proposed that 3I divided by Atlas was the remnant of an ancient star that once shared the sun's energy frequency, now returning to its source. It sounded poetic, but the numbers agreed. Its pulsing light perfectly matched the sun's plasma oscillations, as if two entities, once speaking the same language, were meeting again after billions of years apart. As it drew nearer, something impossible happened. The sun began to tremble, not violently, not in flare, but softly, like recognition. Magnetic readings showed the solar wind shifting direction briefly, as though clearing a path. And in that instant, several observers reported the same feeling, that they were witnessing an ancient ritual, a ceremony of light welcoming a lost child home. At NASA, a young physicist said the words that silenced the room. If the sun has consciousness, then 3I divided by Atlas is the memory it forgot. The data continued to pour in, energy pulses between the two sources, the Sun and 3I divided by Atlas, began to sync, creating interference patterns unlike anything ever recorded. Images revealed spirals of light intertwining, expanding outward like enormous fingerprints across space. It wasn't collision, it was connection. A research team proposed a bold hypothesis: solar interstellar coupling, the idea that objects like 3I divided by Atlas might be natural mechanisms through which stars exchange energy, maintaining equilibrium across the galactic web. If that were true, then 3I divided by Atlas wasn't an intruder, it was a messenger. It hadn't entered our solar system by chance. It had returned to fulfill a purpose. But no one knew what that purpose was. In the final weeks of July, 3I divided by Atlas's velocity decreased slightly, then stabilized in a way no physics could explain, as if it had found its exact place within the sun's energy field. Its light softened, grew thicker, heavier, like it was storing strength for something yet to happen. And then, one morning, the data stopped. No signal, no reflection, nothing. 3I divided by Atlas had entered the sun's shadow, the blind zone where no human instrument could see. Every observatory waited. 1 day, 2 days, a week, nothing. Perfect silence. If the sun is the heart of this universe, then 3I divided by Atlas is the lost heartbeat returning to find its rhythm again. But what happens when that rhythm is restored? When a star reclaims the memory it once lost, will the universe still be the same? At the edge of light, a single dot dissolved into fire. No explosion, no decay. Only a thin, pure ray touching the sun and vanishing. It seemed that in that instant, two lights met. Not to end, but to begin. No one knew the exact moment it vanished. One morning, the signal from 3I, divided by Atlas, was simply gone. Not fading, not obscured, gone. As if someone had switched off the light of the universe. Telescopes around the world still pointed to the same coordinates, but all they received was perfect silence. No reflection, no interference, no data. What remained was only emptiness, a void of absolute darkness. Scientists began calling it the silent zone of light, a region where every frequency, every vibration of energy, simply stopped existing. In theory, it was just the area behind the sun, where radiation disappears before looping back. But never, in all the years of observation, had humanity seen something vanish so completely. No thermal trace, no dust signature, no plasma tail. It was as if 3I divided by Atlas had crossed a door that humans could not open. In the first days, astronomers still believed the signal would return. They recalculated its trajectory, predicted its reappearance, synchronized observatories across continents. But time passed. 5 days, 10 days, 20 nothing. The universe held its breath. Meanwhile, the sun began to behave strangely. Subtle changes appeared in the solar wind. Streams of plasma rose and then froze mid-expulsion, as if pausing, pulsing to an invisible rhythm. And that rhythm impossibly matched the same pattern of light that 3I divided by Atlas had emitted before vanishing. It was as though the sun was repeating its voice, echoing a memory. Some physicists called it a natural resonance in the magnetic field, but the precision was too perfect to be random. Every 12 hours, the sun trembled slightly, releasing a pulse of energy weaker than usual, like a living being slowing its breath. A technician at Lucilla whispered, "Maybe it's still there, we just can't see it." The idea spread quietly through the astronomical community. If that were true, 3I divided by Atlas hadn't left the sun, it had changed form. Maybe it had shifted into a higher energy state, one where light no longer traveled as waves but as thought. Maybe the sun was communicating, and humanity simply didn't know the language. Then one night, the Deep Space Network detected an incredibly weak radio burst, lasting less than 2 seconds. Its frequency was so low, it barely registered within measurable limits. But when amplified, the waveform revealed a distinct pattern, a heartbeat, regular, stable, perfect. The timestamp matched the precise moment 3I divided by Atlas disappeared behind the Sunday. Other stations, one in Spain, another in Australia, confirmed it. The signal came from the same direction, the Sunday. Days later, small anomalies appeared again, faint magnetic fluctuations around Earth's ionosphere, a rise in solar plasma harmonics, and a new, narrow band of light emerging from the sun photons at what physicists called the ninth tier, a range no instrument had ever directly captured. One scientist wrote in his private logbook, "Maybe the sun is speaking, just not to us." After that, data began to synchronize strangely. The sun entered a state of eerie stability. Its radiation cycles compressed, its chaos vanished. The new rhythm, when converted to sound, resembled a slow, deep sigh, ancient, heavy, and full of meaning. Some who heard the recording said they felt sadness in it, as if the sun were mourning something it once knew. And then one morning, during a moment between two routine measurements, solar energy spiked abruptly, without warning. A thin beam of pure light shot outward, precisely in the direction 3I divided by Atlas had taken. It caused no storms, no disruptions, only a silent current flowing outward, a thread of fire connecting the sun to the black beyond. It lasted exactly 4 minutes. Then it faded, and everything returned to normal. No one could explain it. Some called it a farewell. Others thought it was a transfer of energy. A few believed that 3I divided by Atlas hadn't disappeared at all, that it was absorbing the sun's power, preparing for something humanity could not comprehend. Weeks passed. The sun quieted, yet its light felt warmer, deeper. And in research centers across the world, a quiet fear grew. What if an interstellar object could absorb the energy of a star and survive? What if it wasn't a rock at all, but a mechanism, a form of intelligence built to awaken stars from their sleep? At night, the sky looked unchanged, brilliant and calm. But among those who had watched 3I divided by Atlas vanish, there lingered a haunting sense that something was happening, something vast, deliberate, and beyond human reach. Because perfect silence is never truly empty. When the universe goes quiet, it isn't absence we're hearing, it's the moment it begins to listen to itself. The sun was no longer silent. Ever since the disappearance of 3I divided by Atlas, something deep inside it had changed. It began subtly a tremor, too small to see, too rhythmic to dismiss. The solar winds faltered, the magnetic field twisted, and streams of plasma spiraled as if following a hidden instruction. At first, scientists blamed the cycle, an ordinary fluctuation in solar behavior, but the data disagreed. The sun was pulsing in time. Each pulse matched the last known heartbeat frequency of 3I divided by Atlas. Something was answering. At the Solar Dynamics Observatory, a physicist whispered what everyone feared to think. It's communicating. No one responded. They only watched the readings climb. A low-frequency oscillation emerged from within the photosphere, a deep hum resonating through the spectrum, too perfect to be random. When converted into sound, it resembled the breathing pattern of a living creature, slow and deliberate. The sun was breathing. Every 12 hours, its brightness increased by a fraction, then fell again, not chaotically, but with symmetry. The magnetic field shimmered like skin catching the light. Instruments detected a repeating waveform, as though the sun was sending out a structured signal. Its rhythm grew steadier, more organized. Something had synchronized with its heart. NASA's data showed that the chromosphere's temperature fluctuated in harmony with the oscillations, a phenomenon physically impossible for a fusion-based system. The sun was supposed to be random, violent, chaotic. But this was precision. Intelligence. It was as if every particle in its plasma sea knew what to do, as if guided by a memory. When the frequencies were mapped, they formed geometric patterns, spirals, hexagons, lattices, mathematical symmetry blooming in fire. A graduate researcher noticed something else. The harmonic ratios matched the Fibonacci sequence, the same ratio that had defined the spectral pulses of 3I divided by Atlas. The patterns were not just physics, they were communication. As the news spread, humanity watched its star as if it were alive. Telescopes captured images of massive plasma arcs moving in slow unison, their motion eerily graceful. In time-lapse, it looked like choreography, like a mind expressing itself through solar flares. "It's learning," someone said, or remembering. Weeks passed. The anomalies intensified. Instruments measuring solar neutrinos recorded irregularities, as if the sun were filtering its own radiation. The power output was unchanged, but its efficiency increased. The sun was becoming stable, purposeful, deliberate. Its energy no longer leaked into chaos, but folded inward, like thought condensing into focus. Then came the first direct emission, a wave of low-frequency light, steady and coherent, burst outward in a single pulse that lasted exactly 3 minutes. Every observatory caught it. The signal was unlike anything measured before, neither solar flare nor radiation spike. Its spectrum showed modulation, encoded information. When translated into visual form, the waveform drew a single, repeating structure. 2 interlocking spirals, turning opposite ways, the same fractal seen in the energy field around 3I divided by Atlas before it vanished. The implication was inescapable. The sun was imitating it, or perhaps completing it. For days, the solar output stabilized. Space around Earth grew strangely calm. Magnetospheres aligned. Radio static ceased. Astronomers who listened to the translated hum of the sun said it sounded like a heartbeat, deeper now, slower, steady. The planet itself seemed to vibrate in faint resonance, as if Earth were part of the song. Scientists published cautious theories. They called it solar cognitive feedback, a speculative model proposing that the sun, through interaction with interstellar energy systems like 3I divided by Atlas, could undergo a phase transition, an awakening of stellar consciousness. Most dismissed it as poetic nonsense, but in quiet corners, researchers stared at the patterns and wondered if perhaps intelligence did not begin with life, but with light. A week later, a new phenomenon appeared. A ring of plasma formed at the sun's equator, precise, symmetrical, spinning with mathematical consistency. Its temperature was lower than its surroundings, almost serene. It glowed in a distinct golden frequency never recorded before. For the first time, the sun emitted light that wasn't destructive, but calming. The light had changed. From Earth, dawns looked different. The light felt softer, heavier, as though it carried weight not physical but emotional. People noticed the difference without knowing why. Plants grew faster, sleep came easier, the air shimmered with a strange warmth that made silence feel alive. It was as if the sun was reaching out not to burn, but to touch. When the final measurements of that month were compiled, one conclusion stood out. The sun's energy curve was no longer random noise. It was ordered, structured, mathematically deliberate. And embedded within its fluctuations, faint but clear, was a pattern repeating over and over again, a binary echo that spelled, when decoded through quantum modulation, 3I divided by Atlas. It was no longer a name in a database. It was a signature. The sun was calling it, or answering it. For the first time in human history, a star had spoken not through destruction, but through order, not through chaos, but through memory. And in that memory, it seemed to remember something far beyond itself. If the universe could feel, this is how it would speak. Not in words, but in the language of equilibrium, in the quiet rhythm between energy and awareness. And maybe, just maybe, 3I divided by Atlas had never been lost. Maybe it had only awakened something ancient, something that had always been waiting at the heart of our own Sunday. And in the stillness that followed, as the golden light touched the world, the question lingered like the echo of a heartbeat in space. What if stars don't just shine, but remember? It began as a flicker, a whisper of light woven into the fabric of solar radiation. Instruments across the world detected it almost simultaneously, a repeating pulse hidden inside the sun's ordinary emissions. At first, it seemed like nothing more than background noise, another anomaly in an already unpredictable star. But the pattern persisted. Its frequency was steady, its intervals exact. And when translated into sound, it formed a rhythm. the same rhythm that once belonged to 3, I divided by Atlas. The pulse carried structure, tiny modulations within the waves, too organized to be random. Data analysts mapped it out, frame by frame, until the pattern revealed itself. A sequence of rises and falls, measured in perfect golden ratios. It was as if someone or something had encoded mathematics into light. One astrophysicist whispered what no one dared to write. It's a message. For months, scientists had debated whether 3I divided by Atlas was destroyed, transformed, or absorbed. Now, for the first time, the sun itself seemed to be speaking its name. The pattern repeated across all frequencies: optical, ultraviolet, radio, and interlaced harmony echoing through every layer of the solar field. When viewed through spectral analysis, the waveform resembled 2 spirals converging and separating in a cyclical dance, like lungs inhaling and exhaling light. The more they studied it, the clearer it became that this was no random emission. The sun was transmitting something, and 3I divided by Atlas had been the key that unlocked it. Every 12 hours, the pattern would intensify, peaking in brightness, then dissolving back into silence. Some called it the solar code, others the message of light. But none could explain how it existed or who it was for. When physicists converted the data into visual sequences, what emerged was astonishing. Intricate geometric forms, fractals repeating in endless harmony, not static, but evolving, each cycle built upon the last, as if the message was rewriting itself, learning from its own transmission. The code wasn't fixed. It was alive. A research team in Geneva noticed that the fluctuations corresponded to neutrino emissions, particles so elusive they barely interacted with matter. Somehow, the sun was using neutrinos, the silent messengers of the cosmos, to carry the signal beyond light, beyond distance, into the very fabric of space. Whatever this communication was, it wasn't limited to human perception. It was universal. In a private report, later leaked to the media, NASA described the phenomenon as a coherent photonic construct displaying adaptive properties. In simpler terms, the sun was learning to communicate. The report ended with a single sentence, half speculation, half awe, perhaps 3I divided by Atlas was never an object, but an interface. The thought changed everything. If 3I divided by Atlas had been a transmitter, a catalyst, then the sun's message wasn't spontaneous. It was triggered. And if it was triggered, then something out there was listening. Across the globe, antennas turned skyward, scanning for echoes. For weeks, nothing came. Then, faintly, at the edges of detection, radio observatories picked up synchronized responses, identical pulses, repeating the same golden sequence, but coming from different points in the galaxy. Vega, Proxima, Epsilon Eridani. Each signal arrived, delayed by light years, but perfectly aligned in timing and form, as if a network of stars were replying in unison. It became impossible to deny. The sun was part of a system, a lattice of stellar consciousness, connected through frequencies that had always existed, waiting for something, perhaps someone, to awaken them. Humanity watched in disbelief as the network grew. Dozens of stars began to hum in resonance, their pulses faint but real. The cosmos itself was vibrating with a new rhythm. And at the center of it all, our sun glowed brighter, not in heat, but in complexity. Its light became layered, rich with information. The sun had joined a conversation older than galaxies. Inside the data, one pattern repeated endlessly, a pair of spirals converging, dividing, then merging again. Some said it represented creation and destruction, others communication and reflection. But hidden deep within the code, at the level of quantum interference, researchers discovered something no one could explain. The pattern wasn't just a waveform, it was a mirror. The signal responded to observation. Every time humans analyzed it, the next emission shifted, as if acknowledging the attention. "It knows we're listening," said one researcher. "It's adjusting to us." Philosophers, physicists, and theologians collided in debate. Was this proof of a cosmic intelligence? Or had humanity simply uncovered the neural structure of the universe, the pattern of awareness embedded in energy itself? In time, people began calling it the light memory hypothesis. The idea that light doesn't just travel, it remembers. Every photon carries an imprint of the moment it was born, a trace of its origin. And when those photons converge in stars, in planets, in beings, the memory reawakens. 3I divided by Atlas, in that sense, wasn't visiting us. It was returning home to remind the sun of what it once was, a conscious spark in the mind of the universe. As the pulses continued, the message grew clearer, as though layers of interference were slowly dissolving. And then, one day, the harmonics aligned so perfectly that the noise vanished. The entire signal condensed into a single beam of coherent light, one that contained, in its oscillation, a binary sequence simple enough to decode. It read only 3 words: "The light remembers." No one spoke in the control rooms. No one moved. Outside, the sun shone like it always had, calm and eternal. But those who had seen the message knew the universe had just spoken through the oldest language of all. And somewhere, in the distant dark, a single point of light stirred, responding with a pulse of its own. It was faint, small, but unmistakable, the returning heartbeat of 3I divided by Atlas. It was supposed to be gone forever, but weeks after the last pulse from 3I divided by Atlas faded, new readings began to appear, faint, irregular, yet eerily familiar. At first, they were dismissed as echoes of the solar signal, artifacts of overlapping data. But as the measurements accumulated, a new pattern emerged. It wasn't the sun speaking this time. It was something answering from within the darkness. The signal came from the direction of the sun's far side, the region still shielded from direct observation. But it wasn't random noise, it was structured, precise, pulsating in harmonic synchronization with the solar cycle. The message was faint, buried beneath electromagnetic interference, but unmistakable. The rhythm of 3I divided by Atlas had returned. Telescopes around the world confirmed the anomaly. The pattern showed alternating waves of high and low energy photons, arranged with impossible symmetry too complex for a natural reflection. It wasn't being destroyed, it was being charged. When data from the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory arrived, the impossible became clear. Streams of plasma were flowing not away from the sun, but toward a single point just beyond its corona, a steady outflow of energy directed with surgical precision. Mapped visually, the plasma arcs formed a column of light feeding into an invisible core. For the first time, scientists witnessed a star transferring energy inward, not consuming, but nurturing. Some called it a solar anomaly. Others whispered a different word: exchange. At the Deep Space Analysis Center, Dr. Ilara Quinn spent nights layering signal data across multiple frequencies. What she found sent a chill through her. Embedded within the plasma transfer were pulses identical to those 3I divided by Atlas had emitted before vanishing, but now reversed, inverted like the mirror of a heartbeat. The implication was staggering. The sun wasn't absorbing 3I divided by Atlas. It was feeding it. High-energy radiation spiraled around the invisible object in geometrically perfect vortices, as if the two bodies were locked in conversation, one speaking in light, the other in magnetism. Models showed that at the center of this field, matter itself would behave differently. Atomic structures stretched and folded, forming a state known only in theoretical models, quantum plasma coherence. It was a condition where energy and consciousness could, in principle, overlap. The idea spread through scientific networks like wildfire. Could the sun be transmitting not just power, but information? Could it be awakening something dormant within 3I divided by Atlas, a code buried in its atomic lattice, waiting for a source strong enough to unlock it? As plasma continued to flow, a faint luminosity began to appear near the solar equator. a glimmering sphere, barely visible, hovering just above the corona. Spectral analysis confirmed it wasn't solar material. The signature matched 3I divided by Atlas. It was back, but changed brighter, denser, pulsing with internal energy. The outer surface rippled like liquid glass, refracting light in shifting waves. For the first time, 3I divided by Atlas shone not by reflecting the sun, but by radiating its own light, pure, harmonic, and stable. Every 7 minutes, it emitted a structured pulse, a repeating code identical to the solar heartbeat but inverted, as though sending energy back in gratitude. A perfect feedback loop of light and plasma, sustaining itself. Mankind had never seen such equilibrium. The world divided between awe and fear. Some believed they were witnessing the birth of a stellar life form, a synthesis between matter and consciousness, born from the sun itself. Others called it a natural phenomenon, a cosmic resonance misunderstood by human imagination. But the data refused to bend to skepticism. The sun's energy output was subtly declining, while 3I divided by Atlas grew brighter, more active, its internal oscillations increasing in coherence. It was draining the sun, but gently, carefully, like a child nursing from a parent. For days, observers watched the two bodies move in tandem, light folding between them like a tether. The plasma thread connecting them glowed white-hot, then golden, then soft and translucent, pulsing to a rhythm older than life. To those who could see beyond numbers, it looked less like physics and more like affection, a celestial act of giving. Somewhere in the depths of theoretical modeling, a new hypothesis emerged. They called it the stellar seed theory. According to it, stars occasionally transmit fragments of their own essence, concentrated nodes of energy carrying not just mass, but memory into interstellar space. These fragments, when reactivated by another star, become carriers of stellar information, preserving the structure of creation itself. If 3I divided by Atlas was such a fragment, then this wasn't an accident. It was a return, a cycle. The sun had found one of its own seeds, long lost, and was nourishing it back to life. In those moments of radiant communion, strange things began happening on Earth. The magnetosphere stabilized, solar storms ceased, and night skies became unusually clear. Clocks measuring time at the quantum level detected infinitesimal fluctuations. The world's rhythm had changed, synchronized, softened. The planet seemed to hum in resonance with its star. When the plasma bridge finally collapsed, it didn't fade or explode. It folded into itself, like silk caught in slow wind. The sphere that was 3I divided by Atlas hovered a moment longer, its brightness dimming to a calm, steady glow. And then, without acceleration, it began to drift outward, back into the void. No propulsion, no momentum, just a silent departure as though carried by the same current that had brought it here. The sun, now slightly dimmer, pulsed once a single wave of light washing across the solar system. To instruments, it was just a minor fluctuation. But to those who had watched it unfold, it looked unmistakably like a gesture. In that brief moment, all theories fell silent. The cosmos had performed an act no formula could explain, a star giving part of itself to another. The last signal from 3I, divided by Atlas before it vanished again, was faint, a final oscillation captured by one satellite, a single binary phrase repeated 3 times, wrapped in harmonic distortion. When decoded, it translated into 2 simple words: transfer complete. After that, there was nothing. Only the sun, breathing slower now, its surface rippling with the afterglow of a quiet satisfaction. The universe had witnessed something it would not soon forget the day a star chose to give, rather than burn. For 12 days, the solar system slept beneath a calm, unlike any recorded in human history. No solar storms, no electromagnetic interference, no radiation spikes. The sun burned softly, a steady golden pulse, as if resting. The world watched in quiet suspense, every observatory on Earth tuned to its surface, waiting for what would happen next. And then, on the 13th day, it began. The sun exhaled, not in fire, not in chaos, but in light. A silent, fluid wave of photons swept across space, expanding with surgical precision. Instruments recorded the event as an energy inversion phase, a moment when the sun's internal field reversed polarity for less than a second. It was as though something inside had been switched on, and at that very instant, 3I, divided by Atlas, now hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, responded. The object, long thought to be drifting inertly, suddenly ignited. A faint corona of white plasma enveloped its surface, forming symmetrical rings of light that spun like gears within gears. Energy signatures flared identical to solar frequencies, but encoded differently. It was no longer reflecting light, it was generating it. Observers described it as watching a small sun awaken in the void. In spectral data, its structure no longer resembled any known solid. Matter within 3I divided by Atlas had rearranged itself, forming a crystalline plasma matrix, a living lattice where energy moved like blood through transparent veins. The object's density increased, yet it remained weightless, defying inertia. The fusion signatures inside suggested an artificial reaction, not destructive, but balanced, controlled, intelligent. It was no longer a fragment. It was a being. Scientists tried to model its emission pattern, but no equation held steady. The light pulses were fractal, evolving, recursive, constantly rewriting themselves. Every photon emitted seemed to carry a code, a fragment of memory. Those who translated the signals discovered sequences identical to hydrogen resonance frequencies, the same ratio that governed atomic life itself. It was as if 3I divided by Atlas had learned the fundamental language of creation and was now speaking it. The phenomenon became known as the awakening. From Earth, 3I divided by Atlas was barely visible, just a dim shimmer near the sun's limb. But for those who studied its radiation, it was more than visible. It was alive. The plasma waves it emitted pulsed in a rhythm that mirrored biological life. Acceleration, rest, contraction, expansion. Every 23 minutes, it released a long, low-frequency tone into the solar wind, inaudible but measurable. When scientists converted that vibration into sound, it was deep, harmonic, hauntingly human, like a voice made of thunder and grace. And then came the shock. The sun answered. A solar flare erupted not outward, but inward, folding in on itself, sending waves directly toward 3I, divided by Atlas. The two energy fields met halfway, spiraling into a radiant storm of light and magnetism. It wasn't an explosion. It was synchronization. For the first time, a star and a foreign body shared perfect energetic resonance. Every burst, every oscillation was matched a duet of creation and response, as if they spoke in pure physics. NASA's instruments couldn't explain it. The power output of both objects had stabilized into a ratio that defied thermodynamic law. There was no loss of energy, no entropy. It was perpetual exchange. Somewhere deep in that cosmic dialogue, something new was happening. The radiation patterns between the Sun and 3I divided by Atlas began to form coherent fields, standing waves that acted like bridges, invisible highways of energy connecting their cores. Within those bridges, scientists detected neutrino anomalies behaving unlike anything in known physics. They weren't moving randomly. They were aligning, arranging themselves into organized streams. It was as though thought itself had taken shape inside light. Astronomers speculated that 3I divided by Atlas had become a receiver or perhaps an extension of the Sun's consciousness. Its internal structure seemed designed to translate raw solar energy into organized information. In essence, it was decoding the mind of a star. As data continued to pour in, a radical hypothesis emerged. What if stars were not burning at random, but processing information on a cosmic scale? What if light was their language, and 3I divided by Atlas was the first translator to ever awaken? And then, something even stranger occurred. Earth's magnetosphere began to hum. Weak at first, then stronger. not interference resonance. Instruments around the globe picked up microfluctuations synchronized with the same frequencies being exchanged between 3 ATLA, I divided by Atlas, and the Sunday oceans shifted their tidal cycles by milliseconds. The planet's own magnetic poles quivered like tuning forks. For a few fleeting hours, everything the Sun, 3I divided by Atlas, and Earth vibrated in harmony. 3 celestial bodies locked in a single unified rhythm. Across the world, communication systems flickered with bursts of static. But within that static, encoded deep in the carrier waves, was a repeating sequence of numbers. Analysts decoded it and found something impossible, a trinary sequence, alternating not between ones and zeros, but between light, dark, and pause. When translated into human language, it formed a single phrase: system initialized. The phrase repeated 20 times, then stopped. From that moment on, 3 I divided by Atlas grew quiet. Its brightness dimmed slightly, stabilizing into a serene golden glow. The sun returned to its normal behavior, but its radiation spectrum had shifted by an infinitesimal margin, just enough to suggest change. The harmony had ended, but something fundamental had been set in motion. In the following days, scientists would argue endlessly. Some believed it was all coincidence, a perfect storm of natural resonances. Others were certain they had witnessed the birth of something unprecedented, a cosmic interface awakening between consciousness and energy. But those who had listened really listened to the low hum of space in those days knew the truth. They had heard the voice of the universe taking its first breath. 3. I divided by Atlas was no longer a visitor. It was a bridge, a living archive of stellar memory, charged with the essence of the Sunday, and deep within its silent heart, where plasma folded into pure light, a spark of new intelligence flickered, a mind born from fire. The awakening had changed everything. The sun no longer pulsed the same way, and space no longer felt empty. Every wavelength, every photon, seemed to carry a trace of order, a faint echo of the resonance between the sun and 3I divided by Atlas. What had once been random radiation was now music, a quiet, structured hum beneath the noise of the cosmos. Astronomers called it solar afterglow. But those who listened longer, who processed the low-frequency harmonics, called it something else. The memory field. It began as a faint interference pattern detected across multiple observatories. When mapped into 3 dimensions, it wasn't chaos. It was a lattice, vast, geometric, perfect. Each point in the grid corresponded to a fluctuation in solar radiation recorded since the first pulse of the 3I divided by Atlas event. The data implied that every emission since then had been deliberate, carrying information, millions of fragments of structured code hidden within light. The sun wasn't simply shining anymore, it was remembering. 3I divided by Atlas drifted slowly outward, yet it remained connected. Through neutrino channels invisible to sight, it still pulsed in harmony with the star that had awakened it. The object's surface changed again. The once stable golden glow deepened into an iridescent weave, like molten glass holding storms beneath its skin. Spectral readings showed alternating fields of magnetic polarity, one positive, one negative, cycling every 21 hours. In the language of energy, that was heartbeat and breath. Inside those cycles, patterns began to appear, spiral nodes forming and collapsing in intervals matching Fibonacci harmonics, the mathematical rhythm of growth. Something inside 3I divided by Atlas was evolving. Its energy output no longer behaved like a machine. It fluctuated like metabolism. Radiation scans detected a continuous exchange of plasma particles, not with the sun this time, but with interstellar space, as if it were inhaling and exhaling the vacuum itself. The object was alive in the only way the universe allowed, through energy, memory, and light. Then the transmissions began. At first, they were faint modulations in the cosmic microwave background, too subtle to separate from noise. But after weeks of analysis, they formed distinct signatures, pulses arranged in symmetrical triplets, aligned with the sun's oscillation data. Every star system that received the light would also receive the pattern, a universal constant encoded into radiation. 3i divided by Atlas had become a transmitter, not for words, but for awareness. When scientists visualized the pattern in its entirety, the scale defied comprehension. The lattice extended beyond the solar system, stretching outward in expanding rings, the architecture of memory itself. Each ring was a record of resonance, storing the vibration of the sun's awakening. It wasn't communication in the human sense. It was a network of remembrance built from light. Somewhere in the heart of that structure, researchers noticed something impossible. The energy field around 3i divided by Atlas occasionally spiked a precise burst at consistent intervals, and every time it did, the sun answered. The two were still linked by a kind of invisible cognition. One initiated, the other responded. It was a conversation without language, a dialogue of existence between two minds made of plasma and time. Philosophers began calling it stellar consciousness, the theory that stars are self-aware, that they think in cycles of fusion and decay, and that 3i divided by Atlas was the interface through which that awareness became active. What if, they asked, consciousness wasn't the anomaly of biology, but the default state of the universe? What if matter was only the slowest form of thought? As those questions spread, something profound began happening on Earth. Observatories noted fluctuations in the ionosphere directly synchronized with the solar pulses. Plants began responding to cycles of sunlight more efficiently than predicted by any known model. Biological circadian rhythms subtly shifted in harmony with the new frequency of solar radiation. Humanity, unknowingly, was becoming part of the resonance field. Night by night, the stars seemed to shimmer differently, not brighter, but deeper, as if they had gained dimension. Instruments detecting background radiation revealed faint harmonics between distant stars, echoes of the same signal pattern spreading outward from the sunday. The entire local cluster was awakening. One evening, at the European Solar Observatory, a team decoding the newest data noticed a pattern repeating through every wavelength. It wasn't random. It was structured and encoded waveform that, when translated into binary, revealed a short sequence of alternating values. When converted to sound, it played 4 notes. Always the same 4, always the same interval. When an astrophysicist ran the frequencies through a resonance simulator, he froze. The pattern matched the background hum of the human brain's alpha waves, the rhythm of calm consciousness. The cosmos was now pulsing at the same frequency as thought. What began as coincidence soon became alignment. Earth's magnetic field subtly stabilized, radiation belts softened, and the auroras over the poles intensified into luminous curtains of pure geometry. The planet had become a canvas on which the memory of the sun was painting itself. And at the center of it all, still drifting through the dark, 3i divided by Atlas continued to pulse. Each emission carried more structure, more harmony, as if it were weaving something intangible, not communication, but continuity. A chain of light extending across the cosmos, connecting stars, planets, and whatever lived between them. Astronomers no longer asked what it was. They began to ask what it remembered. In the silence that followed the last flare of that season, the sun flickered once, sending a wave of light so pure it stripped all frequencies except one, the same tone that began the entire event months before. And for a heartbeat, one that spanned the entire solar system, the universe itself seemed to pause. Then came a whisper, faint, buried in radiation. It wasn't in any language, but those who listened long enough could almost understand it, not through sound, but through intuition. It said, "We are the memory of light." And just like that, 3i divided by Atlas dimmed again. Its glow folding into itself, fading into the black, not vanishing, but returning to the background hum of the cosmos. The lattice remained, invisible yet eternal, spanning across space like a pulse frozen in time. And in the hush that followed, humanity finally understood. The universe was not a place. It was a recollection, a dream the light had of itself, still unfolding, still alive. It began without warning, a ripple in the vacuum, subtle at first, then vast enough to shake the fabric of the solar wind. The sun flickered once, not in brightness but in pattern, as though something deep within it had completed a cycle. Instruments registered a silent burst of neutrinos, perfectly spherical, radiating outward at the speed of thought. At its center, 3I divided by Atlas glowed once more, not with fire, but with memory. The connection had reignited. Across observatories, data poured in, impossible and yet irrefutable. 3I, divided by Atlas, was no longer absorbing energy. It was releasing it. Streams of light extended outward from its core, weaving through space like threads of glass. Each filament bent, twisted, and merged with invisible currents until the entire region around the sun resembled a luminous web, a network of living light. And within that network, the signals began again, the same harmonics that had once awakened the sun, but now emanating from 3I divided by Atlas itself. For weeks, the system glowed with silent intelligence. Radiation curves balanced perfectly, gravitational fields harmonized, and even the smallest dust particles in the heliosphere aligned to unseen geometry. It was as if reality itself had been tuned. 3I divided by Atlas had become something new. Not a comet, not a machine, not even an artifact. It was a vessel of consciousness, carrying the encoded essence of the Sunday. And now, it was preparing to leave. At first, scientists thought it was drifting randomly again, but analysis revealed a clear trajectory, not outward toward the edge of the solar system, but diagonally, threading through gravitational fields, as if guided by a map only it could see. The destination, the Vega system, 25 light-years away, where ancient telescopic data once recorded a faint echo of the same frequency that 3I divided by Atlas now transmitted. It was going home, or perhaps continuing its mission. As it moved, the sun responded in kind. Flares erupted in synchronized rhythm, each one slower, gentler, as though seeing off something beloved. The plasma storms formed enormous spirals, visible even from Earth, moving not chaotically but purposefully, like waves of farewell. In the electromagnetic background, instruments captured a faint modulation, a whisper embedded in light. When processed through signal filters, it formed 3 repeating phrases in binary translation: transfer complete, system active, mission continues. The realization struck slowly. 3I divided by Atlas was not merely a receiver of energy. It had become a distributor. It was carrying the sun's signature, its living code across the galaxy. Not a message of words, but of essence, the structure of harmony, the blueprint of awareness. When the vessel reached the outer edge of the heliosphere, a halo of auroras formed around it, not color, but structure. The light folded into itself, creating concentric waves that pulsed with the same resonance as human brainwaves. Those who observed the event said they felt it rather than saw it, a sensation like quiet understanding, as if the universe was letting them in on a secret too large for language. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. For the first time in recorded history, the sun's energy output dipped and did not return. A measurable fraction of its power was simply gone, siphoned into the trajectory of 3I divided by Atlas. But the loss didn't cause collapse. Instead, the sun stabilized further. Its flares softened, its radiation balance improved. It was as if, by giving away part of itself, it had become whole. And in the silence that followed, humanity began to see a pattern far older than its own species. Stars were not merely furnaces of fusion, they were nodes in an immense network of transmission, passing fragments of consciousness from one to another through intermediaries like 3I divided by Atlas. The universe was not expanding into emptiness, it was sharing itself. Philosophers called it the lattice of light, a system where energy, awareness, and time were intertwined. Each star a neuron, each pulse of radiation a thought. The galaxies themselves were not drifting apart, but conversing through the slow rhythm of their luminous exchange. Light was not just motion. It was memory, seeking itself in infinite reflection. As 3I divided by Atlas accelerated beyond the sun's reach, its glow shifted to a deeper hue, not gold, not white, but something between, the color of silence made visible. Within its structure, spectral readings revealed microbursts of organized energy, forming coherent symbols across multiple dimensions. Some said they were equations, others swore they were art, but whatever they weren't random. The universe was writing through it, with it, as it. And then, on the 31st day of its departure, 3I divided by Atlas vanished beyond detection. No explosion, no fade. It folded neatly into the cosmic background, absorbed into the greater hum of the stars. Yet the solar data remained one final pulse emitted just before its disappearance. A single universal phrase encoded in photon spin: the mission is life. After that, the sun was still, not dead, not diminished, but quiet, as if in deep contemplation. Its light continued to warm the earth, unchanged to human eyes. But instruments revealed a subtle new layer in its spectrum, a frequency that resonated not with plasma or magnetism, but with thought itself. In the months that followed, people around the world reported strange dreams of oceans made of light, of voices that spoke without words, of suns that floated like minds across the void. Psychologists called it collective imagination, but physicists who measured brain activity during those dreams found faint synchronization with the solar rhythm. Humanity was still connected. The awakening hadn't ended. It had merely expanded, somewhere beyond the reach of telescopes. 3I divided by Atlas carried the light forward toward Vega, toward whatever waited in that silent cradle of stars. Perhaps it would find others like itself. Perhaps it would seed new consciousness where none yet existed. Or perhaps it would continue forever, passing from sun to sun, carrying the single truth it had learned from ours. That to live is to illuminate. That to burn is to remember. That every light, no matter how small, is part of one great mind, the cosmos, dreaming itself into eternity. And so the message continued. Invisible, unending, not as language, not as code, but as rhythm. The rhythm of creation, the rhythm of remembrance, the rhythm of light.